Hello and good afternoon. My name's Helen. I'm a hypnotherapist and I've come along today to chat to you a little bit about hypnotherapy and all of the wonderful things that it can do to help you. And when I was thinking about what I might talk about today, one of the things that occurred to me was actually that hypnotherapy can be a seasonal thing, which might sound like a strange thing to say because how could it possibly be seasonal? Somebody's mental health isn't seasonal, is it? But it turns out there are certain bits of work that I tend to do at different times of the year. And this occurred to me earlier this week because I had two brides in on 2 different days and working with their nerves about their wedding day. And that's where this idea came to me that actually hypnotherapy can be a really seasonal thing. So I thought I'd talk to you about some of the different seasonal things that I work with. So perhaps let's start with wedding confidence. And it's not just brides, it's the grooms too. Because the brides tend to fear the walk down the aisle. That's a really common fear with people that I'm working with, the bride. But the guys, they've got the speech to do if you're going with a traditional wedding where the men do the talking. And so they have a lot of fear about the standing up and having to speak in front of other people. So whilst the bride gets her scary bit over and done with pretty early on, the grooms then have the speech to do after the meal. And you'd be amazed how many men are sat there worrying about what on earth they're going to say and how they're going to say it and are they going to be funny and are people going to get the jokes and all of that kind of stuff. And then the other thing that's a fairly new addition to the fears that we work with around weddings is the first dance. So you'll notice if you've watched things on social media that a lot of the first dances are becoming a big thing. A lot of couples are doing coordinated dances, things that they've been working on. It's not just a kind of slightly awkward shuffle around the dance floor, which is what it used to be back in the days when I first got married. So because they've got this big deal of a dance, it can put extra pressure on the bride and groom. So I do a lot of work with people around the fear of anxiety, the confidence around it, the fact that people are really focusing on you. And obviously, if you think about most weddings, you've got that really interesting family dynamic going on as well, that sometimes you're not quite sure how different parts of your family are going to react with other parts of your family. There's a lot of body confidence and this kind of public speaking thing. So there's a whole load of work around weddings that I tend to do. And we're really busy this time of year doing them. So where does hypnosis come in? Well, there was some recent research around 3/4 of brides saying that they fear anxiety on their wedding day. So if you're somebody that's getting married or you know someone that's getting married, chances are that they're feeling worried and anxious about their wedding day. So hypnotherapy is really great for calming down those fears and helping you feel relaxed and confident, helping you actually enjoy the day as you meant to, instead of focusing on all this sort of people pleasing. Is somebody looking at me? Is Auntie Flo getting on with Grandma and all that kind of stuff? You can actually just get on and just be really present in the moment and really enjoy the day. So that's my first seasonal bit of hypnotherapy that I wanted to talk to you about. So I think we're just going to play a little song now and I'll come back to you in a little while and tell you about another seasonal bit of work that I do. Hi everybody, it's Helen the hypnotherapist. Welcome back. And as you know, if you were listening earlier, I'm talking about hypnosis that tends to be seasonal. So hypnosis that I tend to be doing with people at this time of the year. So we've just been talking about wedding confidence. So let's talk about probably the thing that happens after the wedding, which is the honeymoon. So I'm not talking about the fear of the honeymoon, you'd be glad to know, but it's the how you get there, the fear of flying. And it's a really common phobia, this one. Probably about 1 in 6 people have got a fear of flying. And for most people, it's just a bit of mild discomfort. There aren't many people that you come across that absolutely love flying. But for other people, it can be all-consuming to the point where they can't possibly contemplate getting on a plane, where it's just unbelievable. And even the thought of booking a holiday, never mind actually packing your suitcase and taking yourself off to an airport, is just beyond something they can possibly comprehend. So that does tend to limit the things that you can do. So a lot of people that I work with end up finding that they don't go on family holidays and they're missing out, or they're not exploring parts of the world that they want to go to. So it's a really common fear, this. And the interesting thing is the way your mind works. So imagine somebody that's about 50 years old. Maybe they've had 40 flights on a plane, perhaps if they've gone once a year-ish. And of those flights, 40 of those flights have been great. And maybe they've had one that was awful. Maybe they had one where there was some turbulence, it was a bit bumpy. They just didn't enjoy it for whatever reason. And what happens with the mind is the mind tends to replay that awful flight. And the interesting thing about your mind is the mind can't tell the difference between real and imaginary. So if you're somebody with a fear of flying and you're replaying that one terrible flight over and over and over and over again in your mind, the next time you come to get on the plane, your subconscious is going to be like, whoa, no way are we getting on this plane, because you've had 40 great flights, but you probably had 1,000 terrible flights if you think about your imagination, because you've been replaying it over and over and over, and you've probably added a bit more fear every time, a bit more terror to it, so that it becomes this absolutely terrifying thing. And your subconscious does what it's designed to do, and that is protect you from any danger. So it does things, so it triggers off this fight or flight response. Ironic name, really, considering we're talking about flying, that prevents you from actually getting on the plane. You feel dizzy, you feel shaky, you feel sick, you feel like you're going to pass out, you lose control of your bowels. All of this kind of thing happens because of the fight or flight response, which is kicking in as a way of protecting you from things that are dangerous. And your subconscious has just got in a bit of a tangle about what is actually dangerous. So where does hypnotherapy come in? Well, hypnotherapy can untangle that wiring and recreate the calm flights that you'd previously had. And even if you've never flown before and you're feeling nervous about it, we can still put in that subconscious suggestion so that when you think about getting on a plane, or when you do actually get on a plane, you'll be able to feel calm, relaxed, be able to enjoy it, and you'll be able to be looking forward to your holiday. What a lot of people with a fear of flying tend to do is they force themselves to get on a plane, have a nightmare journey across, and then they spend their entire 2 weeks of being on holiday worrying about coming back. And the great thing with hypnosis is we can completely switch that off so that people can actually enjoy the flying again. So that's my next seasonal topic for you. I'm going to be back in a little moment with another topic for you. Hello, it's Helen, the hypnotherapist, and welcome back. As you know, I'm talking about seasonal hypnotherapy at the moment. So we've talked about wedding confidence and we've talked about fear of flying. Let's talk about something else that's quite common this time of year, and that's hay fever. And you know, you're probably surrounded by people that suffer with hay fever. It's really common. About 1 in 4 adults in the UK suffer with hay fever. And interestingly, it always used to be the thing that kids had, and they sort of had a miserable time through their exams, and then they sort of grew out of it in their late teens and early 20s. But these days things are changing. There's actually been a rise in adult onset hay fever, with a lot of people developing hay fever symptoms later in life. And hay fever can be pretty miserable, really. It's not just having a sniffle. If your eyes are sore, you can't stop sneezing, you want to scratch every little bit of your nose, it's just really awful. So it can affect how you sleep, you can't focus on things, you can't go outside. Heaven forbid you won't want to cut your grass, because that is just horrendous. So people that struggle with hay fever are really, really suffering. So you're probably wondering how on earth hypnosis can help you with hay fever. Well, the interesting thing is why would one person suffer with hay fever and somebody else wouldn't? Because we're essentially the same old bag of skin and bones, aren't we? So why does one person experience it worse than somebody else? Well, they've obviously got an overreactive response to the pollen. And we can actually use hypnosis as a way of calming that down. So if you think about what's the worst day for somebody that suffers with hay fever? Well, the worst day is a sort of slightly warm summer's day with a bit of a breeze. And because what that does is that whips up all the pollen, and the moment you step outside, it's in your eyes and up your nose. So the complete opposite of that, it would be a cool day and a still day, probably with a bit of rain, a sort of damp day. And actually what we can do by using hypnosis to visualize being in those situations, you're actually able to turn down your response to the hay fever and reduce your allergic reaction. And interestingly, I have a recording. It's one of the first things I did, so it's probably about 12 or 13 years old now, this recording. And one of the people that took this recording in the early days, going back to weddings again, was a guy who was a wedding photographer. And if you think about what's the worst job that you could possibly have where you're suffering with hay fever, a job where you're going to be outside in the summer is going to be one of them when you're a wedding photographer. And he was having to take tablets galore. And the interesting thing that happened was he started listening to my track and it completely turned off his symptoms. So he didn't have to take any medication at all. And in fact, it was so profound for him that he actually ended up retraining as a hypnotherapist. So that's hay fever. We've talked about fear of flying. We've talked about wedding confidence. And I've got one more thing coming up after this next little break. Hello and welcome back. It's Helen, the hypnotherapist here, and we're talking about hypnotherapy that can be used on a seasonal basis. So the last one I'm going to talk about, we've already talked about weddings and fear of flying and hay fever, is school and school holidays as well. So maybe you've done what I've done, and I've got 3 children, 2 of whom are just waiting for their A-level results, and 1 is waiting for GCSE results right now. So you can imagine what my home has been like over the last few weeks and months, and also as we're getting very close to results days, those stress levels are spiking as well. So I do a lot of work with young people and also with parents that are juggling and to work with stress around school. So there's that returning to school thing in September, and everybody knows what that feels like. And if you ever have that Sunday evening fear of going back to work, imagine that multiplied and going back to school, or even starting a new school or a new college or going to university. All of these transitions that our young people are going through are really peak times for their anxiety and spikes in anxiety. And of course, it is normal to feel nervous about all of those kinds of things. But sometimes we find that students are really struggling with their mental well-being. And I think we know really that our young people are not in a great place generally. Maybe it's a bit of COVID that's impacted on them. Maybe it's the pressure of social media. Maybe it's the academic pressure that's put on them. But our young people are having a tough time at the moment, and their mental well-being can be a bit of an issue. And also for the parents that are having to live with those young people, and perhaps you're working from home and trying to juggle young kids and entertain them during the school holidays while still holding a meeting with your boss. And it's that mental load that we talk about, where the adults are really struggling with that at the moment. So we've got a lot of things going on with these school holidays. And it's the stress and anxiety which hypnotherapy is really, really helpful. And so we can do work with young people and with the parents to help them reduce their stress levels, their anxiety levels, increase their confidence, so that they go into these new environments feeling good, feeling confident, feeling calm, feeling that they belong, none of that imposter syndrome. So hypnotherapy can be really fantastic, and how interesting that we have seasonal work around hypnotherapy. I imagine that perhaps when I started talking that you were thinking about New Year, and yes, we 100% get seasonal work around New Year, because people come back after a Christmas break and sometimes they want to do some de-stressing work. And sometimes it's around New Year's resolutions. So I can be working with people that want to lose weight, or people that want to stop smoking. Those kinds of pieces of work tend to be quite common in the new year. But this happens all year round. And so in the summer as well, we're also experiencing peaks of different types of work. So if you want to know a bit more, feel free to check out my website. You'll find it